So I'm here with Clint Freeze with Calibrated Agronomy. We're going to dive into a kind of a three-part series, or at least that's my goal, of wherever our minds go here. I mean, 2025, I feel there was a lot of different challenges. And I mean, we talked on the phone a little bit about maybe what caused some of those challenges at the end. But before we get there, Clint, go ahead, introduce yourself, and talk about the Calibrated Agronomy journey.
Yeah. So thank you, Johnny. We started Calibrated last year, but collectively it's more of a combined force of bioag management, a business my business partner Luke Holtz, and my brother started back in 2015. And we've basically been deep diving biological research, really designing our own products, formulating, and do a lot of R&D. And we combine with Integrated Ag Solutions out of Iowa, and there's several partners there: Mike Evans, Mike Wingrove, Kelly Garrett, and the last but not least, Jared Cook out of Idaho. The seven of us form Calibrated. And the goal was we all have a little different skill set. We all have a similar vision, and we're really just hungry to learn, you know. And so that was the vision of Calibrated, is really how do we focus on sustainability, consistency, and yields, driving ROI. You know, that's our goal at the end of the day, to bring to farmers and help educate around that.
Well, even with that, the education point. So I remember when you guys first got started, I think it was NutriDrip, had a little series, or YouTube series, which if you haven't looked that up yet, go ahead and check that out, because that's where I was introduced to Clint, or I shouldn't say introduced, but that's where I got to know you. And I was like, oh, I like how this guy talks. I agree with a lot of the concepts that he's thinking with. But the part with Calibrated that I personally feel is very unique is the testing protocol. Dive into that a little bit.
Well, and so I think we've got to probably break that testing protocols into a couple segments. But I've been frustrated with the term soil health. So
amen. Amen, brother.
What does that mean? You know, there's a lot of different caveats to it, from structure to biodiversity. And so what does that mean for the farmer that's going to bring him value? And so we've really went into looking at the biological profile of soils, and especially when we go into new geographies that I'm not familiar with, and the farming practices. But we look at the pathogen load now. So the protocol now is we pull our standard soil test, but let's look at our pathogen profile. What's got problems, but then also rudimentary biodiversity pathways within nutrients and how those are brought to the plant or exchanged, solubilized, mineralized, that thing. So we can get a rough idea before we go in. Oh yeah, we can do this guy some good, or wow, this guy's doing a really good job with management. He's got there's a lot of things going on here.
And I guarantee there's sometimes you're like, oh, this is a new one.
there is. And so then on the backside of that, we'll implement our BioAg E product, or try to find even foundational problems that are wrong, whether that's compaction or surface drainage. Sometimes there's some fundamentally things wrong that won't let that environment switch to a healthy soil. So within biology, you know, I think how God made it really is there's a beneficial counterpart for every pathogen in the soil. And it's just a numbers game of outcompeting that. So where we do good is trying to do a little work on the front end to make sure we have success when we get to the field, because so many times we just go out and throw products out. And I'll give you an example. Like, so if just say you have crazy high fusarium or pythium levels in your soil, my 32-ounce rate of a product that has controlling counterparts that will outcompete those, if I don't run a high enough rate for your threshold, it's going to look like we did nothing. So that's one of the reasons we've kind of went to some of the testing parameters to try to dial in this whole thing, because I think sometimes there's a lot of really good products, biological products, maybe we ain't using it at the right rate for what the conditions are at the field level.
That is so true. And, you know, when you first brought up the pathogen testing, you know, devil's advocate coming out, is like, in theory, though, if you have enough good guys, it doesn't matter. Like, that's what I would think. But then you bring in the perspective of having knowing how many bad guys you have is probably just as important, at least knowing that number. You know, because then you know how many good guys you need to put out there. I'm not going to like Clint. I was about ready to just bash that whole philosophy, but that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, how many bad guys you got out there, and that's a good starting point to know. Okay, so if we go the biological route, if it's bioaggy, how much we need to put out to actually have success. You know,
and it's buy once, cry once type thing. You know, so but as the cool thing about it, as we get in more places, our database grows internally. Now it's getting easier of saying, goes back to common sense type things. If you're in a really flat piece, is it tiled? Do you got tile in it?
Yeah.
What can you dig a hole with a shovel easily? Do you got compaction issues? If we can identify some of those environments are easier to change than an environment that has fundamental issues that aren't corrected yet.
So with that, maybe we should transition, into the part of we wanted to cover. What are those foundational things? I know you mentioned compaction here, but what are other things you're seeing? Because I feel like in the marketplace, people are looking for answers. But I think half the knowledge is knowing when we got to fix ABC before even worrying about biologicals and/or do this so your biological works better. So foundationally, what would that look like?
Foundationally, I think, we talk about plants being 98% carbon, hydrogen, oxygen.
Yep.
I think it's the management of those. And in farmer terms, what that means is managing oxygen and water in your soil, infiltration and storage, and managing your residue properly. You get that right, a lot of other things come into play. So, but I think myself, where I've had failures, I tried going, we strip till, min till, went to cover crops. Well, then you get a crazy wet spring or a wet harvest where you rut that field up, you do things to get the crop in, and then maybe we don't come in and fix those issues. And so I think the biggest thing I see is we sometimes get our blinders on and we're like, I'm going all cover crops. I think that's great.
Yep.
But there's cases where maybe, okay, I planted this too wet. I VT'd it light to get my crop in.
Yep.
Then I rutted it up that harvest. Well, maybe we need to come in and reset, fix that issue, then go back to doing what we did. And once I started adopting that with farmers I'm working with and on my own farm, yields came up of just being more in tune with the problems, the little tweak.
FarrontsCon 2025.
November 21st in Kearney, Nebraska. Doors open up at 8 a.m. It's an early riser event.
Dr. Rob Shortell, Dr. Kurt Livesey, Jason Mock. We're going to have a couple of epic panels of our favorite farmers. All day event. Lunch is on us. It's going to be epic.
Yeah. So, seats are limited. So make sure you get out there and get registered. Like
Info at singularagros.com. Get with Shelby. She can help hook you up and get you registered for the event. Seats are going to go fast.
Yes. So get online and get registered.
See you there.
So let's just say, just to help clue in the listeners even more, yes, we don't want to go out there and rut something in, but if we do, what do we need to do to help get that field back to par?
I think, for me, it's first you got to get it leveled up. But if we don't get deep freezes to frack that out, we may have to come in and run an inline ripper if you're on rolling ground. Or in our area, you may have to come in and rip that up, start it over, and then go back. And so where I've had my biggest failures, as a consultant or on my own farm, it's been in situations where I just am pushing forward with this ideology and that's all I'm going to do. And so for me, it's just little things like that. And you can go right back to it. Once you get that oxygen back in the soil, you get that alleviated. Poof, now we can go back and get yield back again.
Well, it's even crazy. One field that I scouted, it was a little wet when the sprayer went through. And, by the time it hit tassel, I couldn't tell. Here at harvest time, I can tell exactly where that sprayer went. So it just goes back to the point of, yes, 98% of that plant, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And like you said, how do we really, I think the one that I don't even want to say forget about, but we may overlook is the oxygen piece.
Ooh, it's critical.
It's a living plant. So how do we make sure that oxygen is there? So any more fundamentals
I think that's it. pH is a big one for me to get it close.
Okay.
But other than that, I think it's the management of oxygen and water in your soil and whatever it takes to get there. And then, of course, there is principles we're learning within cover crop reduced tillage that will help build that aggregate structure to keep that going long term. But I think when we get that crazy environmental shift, hey, let's make sure we address it and fix what a problem we created ourselves because of a wet environment.
Okay, so with that, hindsight's 2020, 2025.
Yep.
We were talking about, there's some of these areas that yields are, 10 to 20 bushels lower compared to last year.
Yep.
Go ahead and repeat the question you asked me when I said that was kind of happening in our environment too.
What was that? Remind me what that question was.
It was, what time did the dew get off the plants?
Oh, yeah, with the transpiration?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we've noticed is in our area especially, we had dews that last till we sap sample. So Monday through Thursday, we're sap sampling till noon, 1 o'clock at the latest. And interns, employees were coming back just soaked, 12:30.
Yep.
And so that plant cannot breathe when you get in conditions like that. And so the big thing is what happens is ethylene wants to tick up. It's a hormone that increases senescence. Well, when that happens, reactive oxygen species go up, and your plant's just under stress. And so a plant being back to the oxygen thing, a plant being able to breathe is a big thing. So
well, and it doesn't show any symptoms of that, at the time,
right?
It's looking healthy, everything's gung ho. So, what are some things that again, hindsight's 2020, but suppressing that ethylene?
What we're doing is there's lots of ways to do it with different trick mechanisms within hormones. So there's ways to induce sugar starvation pathways, and it's a hormonal functionality, but it's a short-term fix. It's something that buys you 10 days, 2 weeks, from that perspective. But I think the biggest thing you can do is just keep your K values higher.
Okay.
The higher your K values, that directly correlates to sugar movement.
Yep.
And, boron's big in there with calcium and boron, but potassium is the big driver of that.
So with that, with your experience with your data set, ratio of potassium to manganese.
Potassium to manganese?
Yeah.
I think what we've found is your manganese has to be super, super low.
Okay.
For potassium not to get in. So if I'm struggling.
Super low, as in that's when.
Like almost non-existent.
Okay.
And so one of the indicators we've found from SAP is when we get good biological activity in our soil, manganese naturally wants to elevate along with silica. So if you've got really good biology, I can usually tell by looking at a sap, it's like, okay, this guy's he's probably got oxygen in his soil, manganese is elevated, silica is elevated. So, but when I see it all the way down and I need to deliver potassium, we'll spike with 16 ounces of a manganese or something in a Foley wrap with the potassium to drive it.
Well, that's probably been one of my aha moments was doing traditional soil tests. Our manganese is always low.
Yeah.
But I take tissues, and it's great.
Yeah.
And it made the idea. I mean, I got to the part of, okay, well, the lower the pH, our manganese are always high.
Yeah.
So it just tells you with that testing protocol, it's probably hiding a little bit of what's truly available to that plant.
We think so because it's whether we go back to our historic tissue data set that we've had 4 years on, or the SAP data set that we got 3 years of data on. It's zinc, boron, iron, and copper are the loss leaders.
Yep.
From our data set. So, and that's from Nebraska to Ohio to southern Missouri. It's pretty wide geography that kind of follows that rule. So.
Now, with those micros that you listed off, which one do you feel would be majority of the time? I would say still get a test, still analyze your field, right?
Yep.
But what's the one that's just like you can almost close your eyes and say that more than likely that's going to be an issue?
Zinc.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Zinc's always really low. And I think in our SAP database, we're talking like 100%, 99 to 100% of samples are deficient in zinc.
Wow.
So it's a big one, but going back to the fundamentals, I think the macros are still in a lot of cases an issue. So I think there's a hierarchy of nutrient order that we need to look at, and macros are still. We want to, we've really preached the micros. They do a lot of things to let the plant communicate and build all these metabolites and let that plant communicate between reproductive, defense, and growth modes.
Yep.
But if we don't have our macros in the right capacity, at what yield, I think in our area, it's a 300 plus before the micros probably really are going to start paying big ROI dividends. So think about that as we've deployed more and more programs out and have focused really heavily on the micros. We see some good things, but where we truly drive some big yield responses is where we're rebalancing the macros, MPKS, and getting those in order.
Thank you for making sure S was in there.
Yeah, S is a big one.
Yes. And if for those of you that don't know, S is sulfur.
Yes.
Okay, that needs to be seen as a macro in my eyes too. Now it's not. Is it the same amount as nitrogen? No, but keep that ratio tight, and usually good things happen.
Yeah. So that's probably the other thing. I think sulfur is deficient in 85 to 90% of sap samples, start to finish.
Okay.
And that becomes really sulfur can be in so many forms in the soil. So it can be, gassed off as a sulfide.
Yep.
It can be combined with another cation to be leached and form salts. And so anytime we have a saturation event and we have sulfate sulfur available in our soil and we drive out oxygen down to 30% or less, probably gassing a big chunk of the sulfate off. So, as we've changed management practices with sulfur, we're going back to fall applied elemental because we want the slow drip. We don't want this big fast conversion to sulfate. It's just too volatile. We definitely get the pounds there, but if the environment shifts hard, we either are leaching or are gassing.
That makes so much sense. We got more rain than we usually do in my neck of the woods. And of course, I'm a drone operator.
Yep.
But the nutrient, of course, I'm there identifying which nutrients I can visually see deficient.
Yeah.
Every field I go to.
Yeah.
And the one that always hit me, sulfur.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense how you put that into consideration of gassing off or leaching. I mean, it's about as bad as nitrogen. I mean, it can just get out of there,
I used to say it's 4x more volatile than nitrogen.
Okay.
My stance now is 10x.
10x,
I mean,
okay.
It is a volatile nutrient. It's a reactive metal. It wants to react with all other nutrients. It wants to go to a gas. It wants to form salts with other things. So it's a really overlooked nutrient, I think.
Okay.
And it's probably the other big piece of sulfur. So within the power of large ag data sets of looking at lots of saps, that's where the true power of data comes. Can we learn things by pulling some saps on your field?
Yep.
Yeah, we can get some insights, but the true power is with all the air, when you figure out air at the lab, air at the pulling the sample, all the pieces.
Yep.
Large data sets weed all those things out.
Yep.
So sulfur is the gateway for 10 other nutrients. So meaning every time sulfur goes up in the plant, it pulls phos, potassium, nitrogen, but it also lowers nitrate and ammonium in the plant, meaning we helps assimilate that nitrogen and gets it into an amino or protein form where we can actually use that for growth.
Exactly. I mean, that last part. So you can use it. You're spending money, so you're using it within that plant.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so I understood this correctly. So when you said, that 300 bushel mark, you were saying that micros could help get you there, but if you really want big gains from micronutrients, you need to have a biological system that's releasing precursors to allow those to function.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but biology is the foundation. And so, I think what we've found is if you have got soil drainage right, you've got pH right, you've got surface drainage right, you're keeping oxygen in your soil, you've got a good soil that can hold water, your biological activity is probably pretty good on its own.
Yep.
And so where I live in West Central Illinois, the guys that got those foundational pieces right, we don't always get responses from biological inputs there.
Because they're already cranking.
The thing we do in those environments is we create efficiencies. We speed up the metabolism of the plant. We speed up the flow of nutrients. So how I look at this, if you've got really good soil and you've got the foundation right, we can get you highly efficient on your nutrient program. Where we absolutely, do great things with yield responses with the biology is more in the degraded soils. Either heavy crops that are really intensive farming practices like potatoes, where we go out into sands, where we go north where we have less growing degrade day units. That's where we're seeing these big yield responses from applying the biology. So I think you guys, a lot of companies go out and they always promote it. There's a bushel gain of X surrounding everything. And I don't think we can look at, in agronomy, it's hard to look at anything like that,
Yeah, there's way too many factors.
Way too many factors.
Like that's the part I thought of. We went to Commodity Classic last year, and I thought to myself, take the equipment out. And these are all the factors as myself as an agronomist have to pull together.
Yeah.
And that's everything from weatherman to which the farmer's doing it too. Like I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, poor me." It's like it just tells you how much information, how much data is coming in, and it sounds like you guys are, bringing out the corn knives and helping deciphering that data a little bit.
Yeah. That's, and we joked yesterday, that we should do a whole series on our failures at Calibrate, and that's where we learn, and so pick up and keep going. And that's been the rewarding part of strike out, oof, aha moment, and so it's kind of been our rhythm and flow the last 10 years of this whole understanding what biology does for you and how in different environments, what you're going to get out of it. And so as we see companies promoting, use our product for 2 years, reduce your fertility by 50%. Or you can reduce by so many pounds of N. There's years where we do our no fertility plots every year. We do 0 to 200 pounds of nitrogen. We don't put any PK out. And there's a lot of years where we, if we get a good growing season, moisture stays about constant all year, we use biology and furrow, we'll grow 200 bushel corn. No problem. The next year where the won't quit raining, it's 65 bushel corn.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So understanding that the environment still will shift your availability in a big way. So what we try to do is through sap, through tissue, plant biomass correlations is get an average of what nutrient flow we increase. When we apply BioAg-E, for instance. What are we getting on NPKs and micros as far as added nutrients over just a control, and replicate that out so we get an idea of saying, okay, under this soil type we can release 30% more on average in an average year. This soil we're only getting 15. So that's but it's really pretty easy to do. It's not that complicated to measure those flows. And so when we come in with a grower and we're talking, okay, what can you reduce fertility when you incorporate a biological system or get your biological system working for you, it's always a conversation of going back to the foundation, going back to looking at your soil, and understanding that. And at home, I always talk, we got ground selling for $24,000 an acre, all the way down to $8,000. And if you think about that, the 24,000's got a lot bigger bank. That you can pull from. It's got just a lot more release. And we've got fields where we've applied very little PK over the last 12 years. No yield ramifications, but light, highly eroded soils. Boom, that yield, 4 or 5 years started to slide below the 10-year average. On our yield. So that's what I think we bring in as a team. We've kind of been down this road.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that. We bought into the whole, you get your biology right, you don't need much else. And there's some truths in it, but there's also, we've found some pretty big, things that aren't true with that statement.
So there's two thoughts that came to mind. We'll start with the first one since we kind of talked about the biological realm first. So the biological side, I know we talked about this a couple months ago, and I mentioned in this podcast before of, people growing their own biology or taking their own home inoculum. And growing that and promoting that. Now, with that being said, you got to have logistics. You got to have the effort of willing to learn. Because there's a chance it falls on its face. Okay. What's your thought on that and what you've learned because I know you've probably done the research on it. So
well, that's where I started.
Okay.
We started making our own compost tea. Had a neighbor I was working with, and he had played with it and said he had a 10% yield gain across his whole farm. And so we started making our own basically in my garage, and dirt floor shed, and started playing around with it. The first year we had in corn a lot of 20 to 40 bushel gains with it.
Oh, wow.
And so me and Luke, my brother, are like,
yeah,
we just stumbled across the gold mine here.
That's right. That's right.
And so next year, a few neighbors do it, some friends, and 0 to 20 bushel, and probably 60% win rate.
Okay.
And so it led us back to, why?
Why?
Right? We used the same source, we did it the same way, and so it gets complicated. And in an agronomy, there's infinite variables.
Yep.
So it goes down to the hybrid, the year, the weather, all those things formulate how you get to that, how well that product responds. So it sent us on a quest to deep dive in everything and run an RNA test, PLFA test, direct microscopy,
every part,
bought microscopes, took Elaine Ingram's soil food web class, did all that. And so then, as we got better at understanding how to build our own compost, how to bring consistency to the brewing cycles and all that, we started consulting with lots of farmers.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Doing John Su bioreactors.
Yep.
And then they would, have their own extraction methods and apply it on their own farm. And, as we see it, 80 to 90% of the John Su's are kind of a failure, the compost coming out. And what's crazy about it is you'll have a guy make 4 totes the same way, the same day, with the same material.
Totally different.
And he's got one that's just phenomenal, beneficial, and the other 3 are bacteria dominant, anaerobic. They seem to be finicky, and I'm not trying to point fingers at it, just what we've observed through the calls and over the years working with guys. And so it's not that it can't be done successful, because I've seen it.
Yeah.
But it does take that whole fail, repeat, and then to get it dialed in. So what we've come up with is a system where our carrier for BioAgE is still compost. It's still a compost material.
Okay.
But we've learned how to interject new species in. Through our process, we control our compost temperature, humidity, going back to the environment.
All the factors, environment,
water, oxygen, we control all that. And then we can manipulate the material through feeding and get a rise in temperature and a fallback. And there's certain places in there where I can interject new species.
Gotcha.
And so when we first started and we first did our first RNA test 6 years ago, we was really good at nutritional pathways. We really didn't have stress adaptation pathways for the plant. We didn't have hormonal pathways. We didn't have any biocontrols. And the biocontrols are essentially what outcompete the pathogen or produce compounds that kill pathogens. And so we didn't have any of that. And over time, we have built all that in, over the last 3 years, and learned to stabilize it. We really happy our stabilization process. There's nothing added.
Sweet.
It's just a complex community, and when you get all the pieces of the community together, we have an 18 to 24 month shelf life on the product.
Wow.
And so the big thing I can say is, if you're going to do it yourself, you better be thinking of the environment that your material is in if you're going to make your own material, and how you manage that environment. So that was our big aha moment with it.
So with that too, because I know right now I don't want to be making a bunch of people that have been making their own compost depressed, right? I just think to myself, what are the steps they would need to take today to maybe reinsure they know what they have then? Because I mean, we did the exact same thing with soil, or when you get a load of manure, test it.
Test it.
Okay, so what would those parameters be in that situation?
Like what we'd look for in the test?
Or what tests are you doing, maybe more importantly? Or like you said, the PFLA test.
Yeah. So we started with microscope.
Yep.
And then we learned how to do counts to look at bacteria to fungi ratios, look at our protozoa diversity.
Yep.
We're looking for different colorization and size within bacteria and fungi to look at just rudimentary biodiversities visually. Mm-hmm. That's where we started.
Yep.
Then we went to PLFAs, and we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on PLFAs. Yep. Eventually crossed that off the list. Just had a really tough time deciphering between beneficial, whether you're in the soil or compost. Beneficial. It looks at overall numbers. Yeah. So you don't get a look of our big aha moment was we was down in a river bottom, and we pulled the grower's best field that grows 250 to 300 corn, and we pulled his old lake bed field right next to the river. And got the test back. The lab was consulting with us. He's like, this field is through the roof. This is one of the best tests I've ever seen. And it was the lake bed where you can barely grow 150 bushel corn. And it's like, oh, it's got lots of biology there, just not what we want.
Yeah.
Because the environment is conducive to these anaerobic pathogenic properties.
Exactly.
So we use biomakers a lot for analyzation, and really like how they break down make it in steps digestible. I think for a farmer, after you do some research, you've got your biocontrol, your biohormonal. So those are microorganisms that produce your hormones for the plant that keep the plant balanced in growth and defense and reproductive. It keeps all that balance going, and then stress adaptation. So that is your everything from exopolysaccharide productions, the biotic films that create structures or segment the rhizosphere from harmful toxins or salt within in the soil. But they also produce all your defense hormones within the stress adaptation pathways. And the big one is your carbon fixation / nutrient pathways. Most of the time when we get yield, it is surrounding the nutrient pathways.
Okay.
It's the delivery mechanism in which because back to what you said before we started, grow healthy plants, all of a sudden you translate back to healthy soil, and that's really our foundation. Let's just try to grow healthy plants.
Yeah. Well, that little segment there was a lot of different small pieces to that test, which in my head I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But in a grower's mindset, yes, the nutritional ones are going to help give you some answers. But then also just knowing what does that soil naturally do, you do that with your compost, but then also do it with your soil.
Yeah.
And see where your weaknesses are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do they match?
Yeah.
Does your strengths in your material match your weaknesses in your soil? Because
I think to the part of, I've even heard, go to your most productive soil and use that as your inoculum. But if it doesn't have XYZ pathway, if you're making a compost out of that, you're not solving, maybe there's a defense mechanism pathway, and that's why phytophthora comes in, I mean, honestly, that's a real world situation. So it seems like we always go back to testing.
There's validity to it, and I think what we learned in our early days is we would send a batch in for testing, and it looked like we're just tickled, boy.
Yeah, this is it, baby.
We got her dialed in, and then you send a text next month, and it's like, it's the same material, did it the same way. Why is that different? And so for us, it's the process leading up to the extraction is so critical, and how we manage that. So if anybody that is doing it on their home, that's the tip. The big tip I have is managing that.
So with that too, you mentioned that you mentioned bacterial to fungal ratio, and you said that your perspective or your opinion is a little different than most. Dive into that, because I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, well, I think we hang our hat that we're a fungal dominant type product.
Okay.
So I strive to be a 1-to-1 in the product, bacteria to fungi. However, I think there's this huge paradigm, within, you go to soil health meetings, regenerative meetings, it's like we have to get our soils at a 1-to-1, bacteria to fungi, to get these things operating properly.
Yeah.
I don't buy that at all. I think the thing we have found is, so like as we've grown, we've gotten into Idaho, Washington, California, because those are low humid environments, pretty sandy soils.
Yep.
Both of those two properties aren't conducive to fungal growth at all.
In my neck of the woods on a normal year,
I
mean, very light soils. I mean, kind of sometimes you feel like you're just growing hydroponically in my neck of the woods. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt.
But no, the point is so you apply a biological inoculum that's fungal dominant, or you're striving to plant cover crops that induce fungal growth within your soil. But if you don't have the environment to sporulate or grow those, so what we've went to out there is we know we're fungal. We need the fungal to fight pathogens. Like we're doing fumigation replacement studies out there.
Okay, wow.
We're doing some really cool things, having a great success, but it's just small rates frequently. Just keep the fungi going in that environment because we can't grow them.
Yep.
So go back home. If I can keep oxygen in my soil, keep moisture in my soil, I can grow fungi like a bandit. We put on a food source and I can sporulate mushrooms all over, when I get the right humidity, temperature, moisture that follows it. So when you see the fruiting bodies actually come up in mushrooms everywhere,
that's crazy.
You've created you've got those to populate out in your soil. And so that's my take on it is it goes back to thinking more common sense is like, as we've tried to do grow outs and we've tried growing mushrooms. Well, if you're off a couple degrees in humidity, temperature, and moisture, you're never going to grow a portobello mushroom. It's that the environment's got to be that dialed in. So think about that. So as we've seen what the benefits are, fungi holds a lot of the keys for structure. It's your nutrient pathway highways where your bacteria cluster and feed up and down those fungal. So it's highly important. I'm not trying to get around that, but it's okay. We got to go to a different strategy in this environment of how we are applying it. So instead of just going all out at planting and maybe in the fall on residue, we're going to slow drip this in every pass that farmer's making to keep that fungi going. And that allows that then to outcompete the pathogens, keep the nutrient pathways exchanging. And it's been some really big yield bumps in those environments. And then the only tweak we made was how we deliver it, the small rates frequently. And that kudos to Jared Cook, on our team for figuring that out, of how to actually be successful with it there. If we would have went to the old one and done application, probably wouldn't look very good.
Well, and it goes back, I don't know if you remember the famous saying, I don't know which president it was, it might have been Clinton, but it's the economy, stupid. Like, it's almost like we need to change that into it's the environment, stupid. We can't forget that aspect.
Yeah.
And we talked about it with soil, we talked about it with plants, we just got done talking about it with compost.
Yeah.
And that was a common thread.
Yeah.
It's the environment. Like, just understand what's going on with the environment, and it'll help tell you what's going on with your biology.
And it'll help tell you how to use it, how to be effective with it. Is the big takeaways for me is I think a lot of times I've wondered, didn't see nothing there. Done, and it's like, well, let's look a little deeper and try to figure it out.
So in that situation, you talked about inoculating the fungal dominance in Illinois, and it'll just keep growing, one and done kind of deal. Is there certain practices, mainly tillage practices, that you've seen that you're able to replicate that fungi, or does it really matter as long as you're doing inoculums?
The deep ripping's really hard on it.
Okay.
Everything comes down after that. In a healthy soil, it does rebound quite well. But so we've found more of a min-till, strip-till system really retains a lot of that. Okay. So that's where we go with it. We try to go in that system, but then we're not, like we talked earlier, not afraid to come in and fix something, reset, start back. So one thing we notice is we get a lot of actinomyces, a lot of mycelium, white. We'll see all this white fungal growth on our residue after harvest, especially get a rain, boom, it'll blow up. But once we've established that and we don't just do crazy deep tillage, we'll see that the next year.
Okay.
So we're holding a lot of the inoculums we're applying in those situations. But where the caveat is I take farms in our area or farms we're consulting with across Iowa, and it's really the flat geographies. But if we can't afford tile, or it's a rented farm, tile's not an option. The biggest train wrecks I consult on are flat fields. I'm going all covers, no till. That's probably the biggest hole I see, I guess, as far as that environment wants to go stay in an anaerobic slow nutrient release, compaction, high pathogen load. And so doing anything you can to shift that foundation and then go put your foot on the gas in other areas has been paramount to getting a grower success, I guess.
Clint, we're going to dive into that more in part 2.
Okay.
First off, Clint Freeze with Calibrated Agronomy, going to be at Ferentz Con.
Yeah.
Okay, November 21st in Kearney, Nebraska. If you haven't yet, go on the website. You can register for the event. Seats are going fast. But Clint, thank you for part 1. We got 2 more of these. And like, subscribe. Thank you for following us.
Guys, thanks for watching the content so far. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got all the full-length podcasts, other video information, tutorials on there. Also on all the major podcast platforms and social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So if you like this, go ahead and check more out on all those platforms.